So did Willy Wonka give you the golden ticket in your chocolate bar to come in to the creative factory? So find your seat belts and fasten them, because we're gonna rock and roll and we're gonna go all the way around the room. And I would love to talk about every painting. I just can't help myself. And there's marvelous and magical things in every single painting. And I just keep getting more and more energized and excited about it. But I am gonna have to hop around because they've actually given me a limit today of how long I can go. So if we're ready and the doors close, I'm gonna go ahead and start. And before I start, my concept and theme, which I love to talk about, is the diversity of the medium. We could go on and on about that, so I'll be pointing out, not with a singular theme, but a lot about the diversity of what pastel is capable of. And then there will be individual comments about the whole aspect of what comes up around the art. One of the talking points I want you to maybe leave from as I'm talking about this is artist's voice. That we do learn our craft, and I'll point out some pieces that have amazing technique and craft and ability, and we all aspire to have that ability, to spell correctly and punctuate where we're supposed to. But at the end of the day, we're writing our poem, we're writing our prose, we're telling our stories in our paintings for someone else to experience. So I'm on a mission here until my ashes are made into a very gritty gray pastel stick, to encourage artists to be reminded not all the time that we're always just applying our technique to get it right, that we also have to edit and look at our work in that sense of the author and the authoress. Okay, so let's get started. So there's some amazingly diverse pieces starting right here. You know, from gorgeous pictorial scenes, this lovely piece from Russia, which speaks to what, as an American in the pastel community, is not a typical way that we would think or we've expected pastel to be. But the medium is so historically rich. You know, on the continent, we go back, and the French are true about the cave pieces are actually probably could be considered pastel. Pigment formed into something for a mark being made. So we love color, but here's a monochromatic piece, and it just has a wonderful magical quality. An amazing top award-winning piece, and it's been exciting the past couple of years that what I've seen in the creative voice is being present. Artists, we seek beauty, we seek grandeur, and there's a piece I'm going to mention this about, that we're often driving to a national park to get inspiration. But if we stay present in the moment, like a fire, a bonfire, or sitting around a campfire and you're having a wonderful conversation and things with people, we are visual. Artists are visual, and in that moment, we see something. And we'll think, well, I can't paint that. Why would I paint that? But yet, pure magic right there. And an intimacy in this piece that's just amazing. Subject matter near and dear to my heart, so I won't go on and on about that, but I love the simple mundaneness. Another term that I use a lot is the beauty in the mundane. You know, I love grandiose subject matters too, and they're epic and beautiful. But I've realized in my kind of 6 decades of painting that where I often pause the most is in those poetic moments. So take those in. There's a lot of them in this show this time. Turn the corner here a bit. A lovely high-key piece. So I know we all love Terry Ludwig's Eggplant, and it revolutionized the pastel world as the organic pigments came out, the quinacridins and the things. And when I began painting, because pigment is a part of our life that we often don't think of, and there's a fascinating history of pigment, beginning with the cave, where everything was earth tone. And then you went into heavy metals, the inorganics, and then we went back to the organics, and we get chemical-based like quinacridin, naphthol, and so on. And what happened during that time period is we could get darks darker and richer. And I think as painters, we're all excessive. You know, color is glorious. We want more color. We want more and more and more. We gorge ourselves on. And value. And I love darks. But this piece blows me away because of the darks are there. But when we pause and look at it, which you're doing with me, how dark is the darkest dark in this piece? So be reminded as painters that what you put in a frame and you present is a universe. It's a universe of your making. So when we look at this painting, what we see is our dark is this. Where if I took that dark and put it over there in the fire painting, it would be a highlight. So everything is based in simultaneous contrast. It isn't what it is until it has a relationship. And this is a masterful piece around that. And this little cubicle, again, I mean, just wonderful. Congratulations to the artist that sold this piece. Figurative work in my lifetime has really come into this magical moment of a bit more contemporary at times and very classical, as we're going to see. So the joy, and our dear friend Ann Hevner from Pastel Journal has witnessed this as well, is this constant evolution, just like our life. Change in time is a continuum. We can't control it. Artists keep experimenting and applying things. And so if we look back in Western art, over that arc and curve in the art world, we see these moments where there's a shift from great classicism into a bit of a more impressionist, expressionist, post, and into contemporary. And this artist, I think, is really breaking some rules in classicism. The middle division, the old classics of where is it, figure is set off. How does this communicate to you when you see it? Is there a bit of tension, a bit of awkwardness beyond the intimacy of the subject that's in there? Wonderful quiet moment in this piece. Fabulous portrait, obviously a top award winner. And there's a juxtaposition in portraiture here as well. The kind of hyper photographic that is now evolved in the last 30 years into this more magical use of edges, but again, great control and great technique. And then we go to the classic, the kind of premiere, and we've got a Corey Pitkin coming up towards the end. And Corey's one of my rock star painters, as is everybody. I don't want to single one artist out. And what does my opinion really matter anyway? But for me, when I look at that painterly quality, right? You know, is pastel paint? No. It's pigment and it's dry. But we think like a painter. You know, paint is paint, that's a product. But being a painter is a painterly aspect to it. It's a gestural, it's a mark making, it's a fluidness to that technique. So in this piece, is it really painterly? I personally wouldn't apply that to it. It's a magically beautiful piece of artwork, but it's not painterly, and that's okay. This piece is painterly, it has the attitude of the painter. Wonderful little moody, magical. I was so thrilled. One, we get to see originals, right? Right, we're all up smelling it and feeling it and tasting it. But for this exhibition this year, I was really shocked at the amount of intimacy in very quiet little paintings that if they were maybe presented in a different venue, right? You walk in a big space, the big, grand, colorful painting leaps out to you, that we're providing this ability to have a moment inside of a piece that the longer you look and contemplate and go into it, you keep discovering dimensions of magic. So really magical piece. Talk about contemporary and expressionistic and imagery. A word that's not often used in my life, and maybe I should use it more, is the symbolism. You know, there is a lot of symbolism we don't think about. We think about objects. You know, a rose is a rose, I love roses. You know, this is this, I love this. but artists throughout time that have been able to marry the use of symbolism. Road signs are symbols. Okay? This is a great lesson in how the mind connects. So we see a kind of an outline of a deer leaping, and we know that this might be a dangerous spot in the road to slow down and be cautious about wildlife. But as artists, we don't pause and think about the simplicity of symbols and how that can communicate. And this really stood out to me in the diversity of the medium of what do these elements represent. We could go to kind of a Native American culture or a more of folk art culture with the pot, the symbol of the flower, the lily coming up, the moon or pearl drop up above. We each get to bring our story to it. Everybody that looks at your work is doing the same thing, just like I was alluding to literature. Now there's a shared quality of being human, but we all have a different story. We've had different experiences. I loved paintings of the Southwest, but until I was afforded the opportunity to come here back in the 1980s, I didn't understand space and grandeur, skies that could blow you away, the ruggedness of the thing, and I'd never seen an adobe before. Now those are a common part of my soul. When I look at a painting, I have a greater connection to it. So as beautiful as those paintings were before, I now as a human have experienced what people that come to the Southwest were able to experience. So again, think of the people looking at your work. They're going to bring their own story. We can close a lot of doors of engagement when we over-explain. My greatest mentor, and I was very young in my teens, said things that I knew were important, but I didn't understand them at their core. And I probably still don't, right? We're not done. We keep digesting. But she worked with me technically. She gave me great inspirations about everything in art. And one day she looked at my work and she said, give them a little mystery. Engage them. Let them finish. And let them make themselves part of the painting. So I think that's important for us to not sometimes over-explain. A great high key painting. This painting here in the corner, I wanted to, again, the diversity is something that I play with, and I'm actually doing a lot more of this now, of playing with kind of a faux in pasto quality. I've always been an oil painter. In fact, I'd worked in oil 3 years before I was introduced to pastel by that mentor who said, play with pastel. And of course, my fingers have been covered with dust ever since then. But to marry the concept that the oil painter can do easily, which is thicker paint, often towards the end of the painting, it becomes part of their technique that then communicates to us visually. We could paint the idea of this texture. We could put shadow marks in a certain pattern and highlight marks and things, and we would have that same depth representation in our painting. But we also now have the ability, because the medium has evolved, with products and papers and things, to be the mad scientist. And that's been a big passion for me from day one. My parents gave us those chemistry sets that no kid gets now because they were lethal chemical in the 1950s. You know, I look back and I think, what were they thinking? But it's what I always wanted every Christmas, right? And I almost burned the house down many times. But what I knew when I became an adult is it had all these science things, and I really don't have a science background or mindset. But I'd go, I wonder what happens if I put this together with this. And my mother'd go, what in the hell is smelling in your room, you know? And I did learn that the one thing to save the house in my life was I kept the garden hose right outside my bedroom window because sometimes they blew up in flames. What I realized as a painter, though, is that dance of giving yourself permission to see what happens. To not always just follow the recipe and the thing. The recipe can give you a core foundation. So I've loved over the decades seeing artists being experimentative and taking chances and putting themselves out there. You only have but one law as a painter, and it's archival. If you work with things that will deteriorate and fall apart, then it will not, your art will have no long life. So in the book, I was being a character last night. My little greeting was ars longa, and it's Latin. Art is long. The rest of the phrase is life is short, so what you do is precious. It's precious. And another thing I noticed, being classically trained over the years, and it just brings joy, hopefully you can feel my energy, is different perspective, right? You know, the way I was trained, it was following those old classic models, like I was pointing out of what a composition should be, right? The rule of the thirds and your horizon line has to be here. And if you're going to set up a still life, it could be a higher elevation or lower, but you were still greeting it, just like in portraiture. So in still life, look at the use of empty space. Rule 1 broken right there. Mysterious, fabulous shadow telling us really the shape of the picture. We know that picture now, but we don't really see the side of it. And then we're looking straight down like we're looming up above it. And at times looking straight up to something. So again, this artist is giving you now permission to go outside of that norm. And that's why we get so excited about coming to shows like this and any of your Pastel Society shows. And looking at the pages of the Pastel Journal and the books and the libraries that we amass, is that when I know that I'm becoming predictable, I pull those books out, I go back through these memory files and I go, look at that. Let's take a chance today and look at the world from a different perspective. This is also a celebration for me because it was something that I never did, which was, again, that elevated sense of photographic realism and really interesting piece. This is going to be hard for everybody to see, but when I move past, I would encourage you to do it. So simple. Now, I'm at an age where I'm like a transparent, it's what do I have to lose? I'm just honest. I'm a man of excess. I can be obsessive. I'm an amasser. If the message goes out that Richard died in Southern Oregon, get on a plane because they do not know how many pastels are lurking in that thing. And decades ago, I went, Richard, you're hoarding pastels. And in my mind, I went back to the Ars Longa. I go, it's not need, it's want. And I indulged it. So what I'm referencing is frequently in my life, and I still do it today a lot, is I do too much. Too many blades of grass, over-explain, go to that excess. And when I look at a piece like this, I'm reminded of at its core, like the simplest poem of a few words that is so profound that we don't always have to put excess in to make a great artist statement. One of the most beautiful interiors in the show, and I love this almost Vermeer lighting, and there are human objects in there, but there's no human visible. And so we get to enter that simple room, we get to experience like we would even the industrial quality of a studio space like that, so the artist's vision, barn and mystery, gorgeous street scene. Obviously our illustrious judge had good taste. Magical moments, things like this can be, this tree painting can be hard to capture for all of you that work en plein air. Which when I began, we just painted on location with a sketch box, and now we all paint en plein air with a pochade box. So we embrace the romance of it. But what you do get with life and working from quicker poses with models and things, or sitting in a cafe, is you learn to imprint on what we used to call the emulsion of our mind when we used film emulsion, is that we often don't have time to develop the whole painting, but you keep imprinting and imprinting, and it makes you so sensitive. If I took a piece like this and I only gave you an outline drawing to start the painting, and I said, now pick a time of day, pick a mood, pick a time of year, pick a color theme, you don't realize you have that ability. Oh, so many wonderful pieces, and I know there's one right around, again, this corner. I didn't realize I picked a lot of corners. So I got to visit with this artist earlier today, and I was talking about how much this piece spoke to me. And there is, as a teacher, and I probably was at times a better teacher than I ever was an artist, or at least a coach. I don't like to think that I'm trying to teach people to paint like me, but I can, as a coach, I might have never won the Grand Slam, but I can watch your game, being in it, and I might give you some clues to get it better. But I know myself as a collector in the pieces that speak to my inner soul, my inner Heathcliff on the moors and things. So when I saw the artist at breakfast this morning, I said, tell me about your piece. And so the title is The Road to Nowhere. And I got permission to give a brief thing. So her and her husband never really been to the West. They decided to fly in Sacramento, rented a car, and they were heading to Yosemite, right? Oh my God, one of the most beautiful places on earth with the grandeur and the spectacularness of it. And it was early GPS on our phones. We all remember getting lost because it kept telling us to go. So they're in the flats of California. Obviously, you don't even see a mountain range in the back. And she said, we drove all day. The light was getting low. The day was beginning to end. And she said, we finally stopped and got out a paper map and was figuring out where we were. And she glanced and saw the road to nowhere, the mystery and the soul of this piece. And I told her, I said, I'm sure I would love to look at a painting you did of Yosemite, but everything is right there in that simple little thing that really communicates. So again, a lot of magical, wonderful moments here. I wanted to give a shout out to this piece because there's, and I'm not saying this by referencing other artists of diminishing the artist's voice, but there is a little bit of the Van Gogh quality to this. Of if you follow the curve of Van Gogh's work, of how classically trained, he could draw very well, he worked in his more earth tones palette when he was young. What I choose to believe about this man, and we have his journals and his letters to his dear brother Theo and stuff, but we all know the tragedy of his rejection, his never finding a tribe. He was a difficult, haunted person. And I feel like at a certain point in his painting life, as Turner did and many other artists, they said, why am I trying to please others? Because every time I try harder, I'm still not liked, rejected, not part of the tribe. I'm going to paint for me. And he really, at those last years of his life, brought an expression to what we were seeing. Permission to use color, permission to change the angle, which gives us a feeling of motion and movement, and the beauty in something very industrial. Or again, back to the Yosemite part, they'd go, why are you painting that? So I had a mini moment. I've had a lot of great moments, lots of mini moments, and a few grand ones. I was painting in Carmel at the Bay, gorgeous California location, epically gorgeous Pacific coast. But I chose to turn my back to the coast, and there was a little estuary, very simple. And partly because I wanted to be left alone from all the people at the beach. And I'm painting away, and this lovely man came up. I talk all the time when I'm teaching and painting, but when I paint, I don't like to be bothered. And I have been known to be legendarily rude and called names I can't say on the mic about me, and I remember saying, be gone, I'm trying to finish my painting. But this man was respectful, and I was aware of him there. And so I stepped back and took a little pause, and he said, do you know what's behind you? And we made eye contact, and I said, are you aware of what's in front of you? And he looked at my painting, and he looked at that, and he goes, oh, and toddled on off. And why I remember that moment of all the many moments is all of a sudden I had a realization of again, the simple, the beach was beautiful. That's what that piece did to me, is again, this moment of how many of us would stop right there and put that composition together and then give ourselves permission to be that expressive in what we did with the medium of pastel. Unbelievable energy in this piece, which speaks to the Southwest, the epic chamisa grass, the power of the sunsets here that are legendary, the drama of the ocean, of the desert. And to be able to capture that in a very gestural way is just purely magical. As you can see, as an award winner, just fabulous interior. I never became really accomplished at being able to do that. And what I wanted to say about that with the several great interiors that were here is that we often, as painters, we think of just the subject matter. Oh, look at that pretty rose, I'm going to paint a rose. Oh, look at that beautiful lady, I'm going to paint her portrait. Oh, look at the lighting in this interior, I'll do an interior in a bar scene. That's great, that's youth, right? When we were all young, it was try everything, the smorgasbord of life. How do you know you don't like this food until you taste it, right? It's anti-made. Life's a banquet. Most poor fools are starving. So that is great as an artist. And that's part of what IAPS has been able to do over the years, is provide this huge banquet, this tease of 2 hours, 3 hours, a day with somebody, a couple days with somebody, and you start going, I want to go back to that part in the banquet and then digest it. So what my encouragement is if I was ever going to get good at interiors, it wouldn't be one painting or two paintings. I would submerge myself in that and give yourself that luxury to make mistakes, but keep showing back up. And like meeting somebody that is interesting and fascinating, and you go, I want to visit you again. I want to have a conversation with you again. And we keep going deeper in that understanding. That's a lot of your subject matter. And I do think at times we think too much about what we're painting, not why we're painting it. This artist actually lives in my valley. This is Eileen Geiger Stanfield, just an amazing figurative painter. I mean, there's nothing I could say about Eileen, but check out her work, follow her. I know she's been in the magazines and journals and she wins a lot of awards, but just unbelievable hand. So I'm going to out myself. I started as a portrait painter and a figurative painter. And so that lovely mentor that I knew would critique. I'm in my teens. And man, she was tough. That old school. Now everybody'd melt down over somebody saying, you don't know how to do that. And they'd go, oh, it broke my heart. So I had done a large figurative painting and I was so proud of it. It was a flamenco dancer. And I carted in and I'm thinking in my head, oh, Margaret is going to praise me. I've worked so hard and everything. And I set that painting down and she looked at it and she goes, the arm looks like a sausage. And I went, how dare you? So after I had come down a bit and she could read me like a book, she said, I insulted you, didn't I? And I said, yes. She said, I know you worked hard. You want to paint the figure? Young man, learn anatomy. There are bones and muscles underneath there. And hands are one of the things that artists frequently talk about being difficult because we want to control them. Sargent, look at the hands of Sargent. 2 brush strokes and the whole hand is there. Look at that hand. See? And that shows a maturity and a sensitivity back to subject matter. Now, I didn't abandon painting figures at that point after being insulted, but I did say I don't want to dig that deep into it. And the last comment I want to make about that, which classic figurative painters and portrait painters do know, is understand what lies beneath. So as landscape painters and everything else, as old art students league, if I look at you and I'm going to draw you and paint you, I have to envision the back of your head. I have to envision the space and the structure that lies beneath. Think of the earth that way. Think of the motion of the ocean. Fabulous ocean paintings out there, but what energy is underneath that thing? And see if you can find a way to express it like it's been done magically right there in that painting. Lovely contemporary piece, very exciting. My President's Award was this piece. I said my comments Wednesday night about this piece. And all I'll remind you from Wednesday night, because the technique is masterful. This is a legendary painter. I mean, he's just, if you get a chance to visit with Brian, I really encourage you to do it. And he's painted a long, long time. What I wanted to tell you is another thing that happens to us as painters, and those of you, if it's your first time here, congratulations, take it all in. If it's many times, it's like if you saw me 40 years ago at this event, the hair was darker, the back was straighter, might have been heavier, voice wasn't quite as gravelly, there wasn't this wobble under the chin and all these things. So when you get to know an artist and you look at the body of their work and the progression, you really get to know them. So literature's way up for me. So I keep thinking about that like with writers, their early work, their middle work, their late work, and there's these periods. And in Brian's work, what I get to experience is the memory of decade-old pieces that I saw that stopped me. And there's a stillness and a magic in this piece that if you do pause and take it in, you can hear the mermaids out in the ocean talking to you in that piece. So a wonderful contemporary piece. Again, I could talk about every painting, and I want to desperately. I really do. I really do. Love Glenn's work, same thing. I'm a huge fan. And I know all of you do this, and man, was I guilty of it when I was young, like I think every young person. You know, you see a film and you go, I'm going to be James Bean. And then you see John Wayne, right? You want to be John Wayne and all these things. We take on the character of the people we might admire in a moment. And we all do that in the artwork. In fact, you know, I tease Ann in the Pastel Journal. I have an art store that's a mile away, a legendary one. And the phone would ring over all these decades and they say, do you know anything about this surface or this or what's happening with this? And I go, oh, the Pastel Journal came out and somebody's painting this way, right? And so the admiration of the people you have, work with them, emulate them, take in the things I'm saying. If I was working with Glenn, I would be emulating what he's doing. I'd be listening to his mark making and gesture and the attitude. But then give yourself a chance to let it become you, because there's only one you. Sarah is from Albuquerque, unbelievable painting, gorgeous seascape. So living on the Pacific, and I'm not being critical, but the power of the ocean, and like I said, being present, what I look for in an ocean painting is now not the click of a camera. The human, we see with our mind through our eyes. Everything's in motion. Everything is moving. And you can't stop the Pacific or Atlantic Ocean or any stream cascading down a hillside or a bird in flight. But with the advent of the camera now, which none of us in this room have experienced a world without it, we start thinking as flawed humans, that's real, and I've got to get it that way. I don't have a problem with that, but I want you to realize the influence throughout history. There's no putting genies back in the bottle. The camera came out, it became embraced as a tool. It's powerful. But if you want to be sensitive as a classic realist painter to rushing water and motion and the effect of wind and thing, be present with it, be contemplative. The most valuable time you have with your subject matter, whether it's a model or the landscape, is being present again, sitting there and taking it in. So as plein air artists, and I was part of it, so much of our life was the Mad, Mad World movie. we get our equipment, we race out, what am I gonna paint? I'm gonna sit here, oh, look at that scene, we start painting. And we're in this kind of crazy motion, and we never stop to say, I don't need to finish, I need to experience. And you go, I won't remember. That's also, I won't remember. And you go, yes, you will. You'll be painting a year later, and all of a sudden you're doing a body of water, like the ocean. And your intuition now has been trained. And you'll find that you're going, I'm expressing something that came from experience. It's a big part of your life as a painter. At my core, and I'm at a position in life, none of us, like I said, art is long, life is short. I love tonalism. And what I knew early on, in fact, I'll share a little personal story. Why not? What the hell? What do I have to lose? Brian and I, over the years at one point, he's a quiet man, but he came up, we had a moment, and we were talking. And I was able to really communicate to him how much I admired his work. I think as artists, we never really know. Don't hesitate to come up to somebody and not embarrass them, but just say, I need to let you know that your work has spoken to me, or what you're doing is really a big part of my life. So I had that moment. And I was telling him the way I felt about his work. And he looked at me and he said, I've observed your work for a long time. And you were what I always wanted to be in art school, right? The war story. And I said, oh God. He goes, George Innes. And I looked at him and I got emotional. And I said, tonalism, at its core, is this magical thing that when I was young, it was discredited. It's gray, it's brown. What it is air and space and a pause. And there it is. And this painting also incorporates the high key, the palette of Wolf Kahn, that modern movement of color vibration and Rothko and all that stuff. There's a wonder, and there are a lot of books now on tonalism, and when I was young there was none, right? And Sargent was disregarded, and then a toast, and there's 100 books from him. And there's this big coffee table book, really thick, on tonalism. And all the greats are in there. Innes, Emil Carlson, just everybody, soak it in. At the end is Wolf Carlson. No, Wolf Kahn, Wolf Kahn. And I went, Wolf Kahn? And I read what the author of the book had wrote, and he said, yes, Kahn's contemporary. He worked in that school. He worked with the simultaneous contrast people, and Rothko was a friend and all this stuff. But if you really look at Wolf's work, there's an intimacy to the landscape, a sense of air and space with that kind of contemporary thing. And I think this painting is the whole package of that. I love self-portraits, and there's several of them here in the room. You can meet Adrienne here, those that don't know her. And there's something, I think we all realize, like with Rembrandt. I wish I could have met him. I can't say that about every artist in history. I worship Degas. Just his whole life. He was not a pleasant person, And you find those things out. And I've had my moments, even mostly in New York, where you meet this legend, and then you go, ew. And I'm sure people feel that way about me at times, where they go, I love your paintings, I wish I'd never really gotten to know you, right? But with self-portraits, and there's another one I'm going to give a little shout out to, when you know the person and then you see what they do when they keep painting their portrait. That's why I said Rembrandt. They keep revisiting that. And it's not narcissism, right? It's like, quit looking at yourself, But I think what they're also doing to us as humans is to be introspective, right? And that what happens with artists that do a lot of self-portraits is become introspective about the process. A beautiful piece with that. Huge fan of Lorianne Signori, light and color. Again, fabulous perspective looking down on a pizza. By the way, my favorite food group, that and taco chips, right? I can let my doctor keeps going, I can't believe I've kept you alive this long because you're just a man that is attracted to junk food. And I go, but a pizza is a perfect food group. And this artist is especially this. Yeah. We have meat and protein, we have dairy, we have bread. Oh, love the image. And dessert. It's perfect, it's perfect, it's perfect. Here's the other self-portrait. Lisa, who's a dear friend and a big part of IAPS over the years, and you get to know Lisa, and a wonderful artist. She loves portraiture and figure. And I saw a lot of her portrait work over the years, but when Lisa started painting Lisa, and not with vanity, all right? This is not about embarrassing. Lisa's a beautiful woman and a beautiful soul, but she's made herself vulnerable. You know, and I saw her earlier this morning, I was complimenting her on this, and she says, oh, my morning hair and my glasses falling off. And I go, but I feel more intimate, like I have just seen you, and I adore you, and we've met, instead of all spruced up, you know, and the faults. So photography went through this curve too, in classic portrait photography. When I look at what was going on with the pictureless in the early 1900s and up through the glory period of Hollywood, and they can be glamorous, but then what occurred? School photographs. Smile, wear your best clothes. There's no personality in them, really, on that core level. The best portrait photographers understood, and I used to lecture about this with the landscape. You want intimacy? The head goes down, the body folds in, even if eye contact is being made. You want extrovert? You open them up. They lean forward. They are thrusting towards you and they're coming at you. And you learn those little tricks as the best portrait artist, and you can bring it to the comments about yourself and your work. I always, and I know all of you do this, and it's a great thing to do as artists, right? What would I have picked? And it's not about disrespecting a judge, it really isn't. But you walk in and you go, or you see a show, or again in a magazine, you go, why'd they pick that? And that's where having the judge, like yesterday, to where there's a window into what is it you saw? What did you feel? And if we give ourselves permission to hear the diversity of voice in the art community, it often opens up our world. My first jury job as a judge was in New York back in the day. Our dear friend Pat was there, as she's been with IAPS and stuff. And they would bring in 3 judges, everything was live, and it was Maureen Bloomfield, worked with Anne, and she hadn't quite taken over the Artist magazine at that point. And then there was a curator from the Met, the paper person, didn't know either one of them very well. And they'd asked me to come in as a kind of a working grunt artist to do it. And what we did is we went around silently for hours, and we had little dots of color. And it would be like, I love this painting by Liz's, and I would put a color dot. And then, so as the hours went, you begin to notice there were dots. Then we all gathered, and this is the curation part of jurying and judging. So then we came back together, and we said, well, here's 3 dots. We loved this piece, didn't we? Why? And you get a quick comment. Then we went to 2 dots. So somebody was left out. 2 people were saying, oh, I'm blown away by this piece. I was the outlier. I had lots of 1 dots. And what I got to talk about was the Ashcan school, some of the stuff about tonalism and stuff. And Maureen, the soul of a poet. And we were sitting having lunch with Flora, as one did back in the day. Flora with her Manhattan cocktail and her beautiful hat with flowers in it, and the National Arts Club was sitting there, and we were talking. And Maureen leaned over in a quiet voice, and she said, it was so fascinating that when you would talk about that painting from your vision, she said it wasn't always that my mind changed, but I understood what you saw. And I thought, that's really important. No one is your boss as a painter. And that rejection, when I made that comment that got the laugh Wednesday night about celebrating all of you rejected from the show, and everybody's like, oh yeah, I go, it's a celebration at times to think you put yourself out there, maybe it didn't connect with this person, I admire them, I respect them, hold on to your voice, keep plowing ahead, it'll pay you off. This would have been my best of show. And I think it's an evolution for me about just seeking that magic and that dark moment and that mystery. And so I got to tell Terry how much her piece meant to me last night at the book signing and things. And she's a legendary painter. And I just adore her work. What is that mantra? Darker, blah. And I walked through the show and I stopped in my tracks. And I went, it's all there, but really, nothing's there. Yeah. Is this a cliff or trees? Is it a body of water? Is there a boat or a couple boats maybe magically? Oh, the mystery. Pure mystery. Pure mystery. Beautiful southwestern scene. Liz, a legendary artist and a fabulous president of the organization. And her sense of design is what I point out in her work. I wasn't trained so much in the graphic design world. The composition is composition, but people that have that eye of design and placement and movement, they often have a good foundation to work off, and Liz is one of the best. Very lyrical. This reminds me of a bit of my dance from decades ago of just a simple section of trees and just play with it. It becomes very musical again, very lyrical, very gestural. I remember doing that over and over, not understanding why I wasn't painting the beautiful mountain and things. And one day I thought, they're like figures. They're like bodies in motion. They're like ballerinas stretching and not doing formal poses, which are beautiful. And if we get intimate with trees, that artist has captured that feeling. Now we're going to jump to a whole different feeling, is this piece. And again, the use of shadow, the mark making, the quiet light, the simplicity of it, the use of surface and paper and what's underneath. What I felt, and this artist could say, oh no, you got it wrong, is the confidence. The confidence of this artist to begin the process, painting what they're painting, and to be present with it and say, could I do more to the eyes? I could. Would it make the painting better? Would it strengthen my story? Would it communicate better to the audience? And I love that confidence, because I have always felt insecure in painting. That's why I over-explain as a teacher from every angle on earth. Poor Anne always knew, I want 250 words, and I would send her 1,000. And most genius editor I ever got to work with in keeping my voice in that thing. And I looked at this piece in the show, and I went, what confidence, what confidence. Wonderful, classical, textural, I've already addressed that. A light that is very much, I mentioned Emil Carlson. And in the Salomon Gundy Club, they have a wonderful art collection, phenomenal library, iconic brownstone, and that was the working artist club. National Arts Club, fabulous, fabulous. Those were William Merritt Chase and the Grand Painters. What you had down at the Salomon Gundy were kind of and Chase was a member, let me get it straight, but they would show up dusty and dirty from their day painting in their studio to drink and be racketeers and argue and all that kind of stuff. It was like a working place. They have a Carlson, Emil Carlson, which he kind of made his living doing still lifes. Very similar with this in a very tonalist way. He's actually my favorite American immigrant, American though tonalist. His landscapes though, when you get a chance. But if you're in New York, go in. They usually have it in the grand reception room. And one day, I'll throw a name out. I was there doing some stuff with Claudia Seymour, an old friend of Pastel, phenomenal painter. She had been the president of the club. And I saw David LaFell, who's a legend, up in Taos. And his work, very Rembrandtish. David's the real McCoy, those old school 1940s and 50s painters. And he was standing mesmerized in front of that still life of Emil Carlsen. Now, I didn't know who Emil Carlsen was at that point, but I knew David LaFell was really paying attention to this piece. So when I didn't bother him, he went away, and I stood in front of that piece and took it in and wrote that name down and started doing the research, and it kicked me in a certain direction. So these are beautiful pieces. I really could wax on about all of them. Love the technique, the simple mark making, the intimacy of the landscape. Wonderful big award winner. There are subjects that some of you are drawn to. That I'm going to give you a little window into kind of a prejudice in the judging world. We could classify painting for the public. You want to sell well. There's a market, Paint Adobe's here, they're going to sell because we're visiting on one Adobe painting, and you paint it well, you can become a legendary artist. There are people that love to paint pets and babies and flowers. In the judging world, then you get to the art world. They often go, you have to work harder is what I'm getting at. And that's what that represents. Cute dog that you love, great portrait, but so many jurors just go, oh God, a dog. Oh, a baby, I'm sure it's a grandkid. What you have to do, see, you could have pleased your marketplace, but to please the artist is the artist's voice. And that tougher curve is the charming subjects that the public loves. You really have to work hard, and that artist definitely did that. Thus quote the Raven over here. Lovely wet street scene. When you get a chance, pause in front of this piece, award winner, Linda Connolly. High key again, we're going to be ending here with a lot of some of the comments of what's there. Permission. It would have been easy to darken these shadows. That would be a lovely painting. It would be a different expression of that scene. So this is what we get to do, is make choices. We have reference. That's great. I was talking with one of you earlier about, it's like we glance at our reference, whether in reality or photographically. And what occurred to me is in demonstrating for groups, they'd say, but what you painted doesn't really look like the reference. But you kept looking at the reference. Why? And I said, because it's like a piece of music that puts me back in the space and the emotion and the feeling I had. And I feel that this painting, that artist has done that. They stayed true to the feeling using, again, a very representational image. Beautiful portrait, purely magic, pure magic. So back to permission. Grasses and marshes love these things. Skies. There's a composition, right? There's predictable. There's nothing wrong with predictable. I eat the same breakfast probably 95% of the time. But every once in a while, when you change up something, or you're in the store with the familiar things, the old routine, but you go, I think I'll try that cereal. I think I'll try that piece of fruit. Here's permission. Here's permission. And so what we feel is, again, this sense to the landscape. We feel this to the landscape. Here, beautiful, we feel this to the landscape. These are the choices you get to make. It isn't click, perfect, render it. It's once you learn to paint, what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with it? So, one of my favorite artists. Very high key, beautiful. I'm glad they actually hung those next to each other. Love the leaning perspective of this. I'm being real honest. I would have had the hardest time being Richard to have not corrected the perspective, lined it up, done the kind of right. And I went, here's a confidence again that is pushing us to be creative. Be very creative. Now, as we start to finish off at this stage, we've got to pause in front of Fred's. If you have not met this man, meet him. You're going to get, if you're open to it, the best hug you ever had. Norwegian, Minnesotan, salt of the earth, the soul is him. And a lot of permission in his life over the arc of his career as a painter. So when I first met him, some friends brought me to Minnesota and they said, you're going to meet Fred Summers. And I said, oh, good. And they said, there's a bit of a mystic about how he approaches his painting. And so if you listen to him and you read the things he's talking about, and this is just the observation of who he is very spiritual. He's had his journey. I'm not saying he's heard voices, but it is like that mysticism of seeing and feeling a depth. Fred's work is another dimension that we associate to. Leaves on a frozen pond or a body of water, but there's this pure magic of something underneath. The penimento phrase that was used by the great authoress Lillian Hellman when she wrote her 3 biographical series. Her first book was made into an iconic movie called Julia that won Oscars for the actresses Vanessa Redgrave, Jane Fonda, a magnificent play and book. And I knew the word penimento. It's a classic oil painting term. And it's mechanical. Penimento just meant, as an oil painter, if you had great brush strokes or values and you decided to paint over them, if you did not remove that brush stroke, you'd walk by the painting and you'd go, there's something odd right there. And if the value was high contrast, oil paint oxidizes, actually becomes more beautiful with age. It takes on a jewel-like quality. But what would happen is a ghosting. So the phrase of penimento as used by Hellman is, if we do not deal with the sins of our past, they come back to haunt us. And a lot of oil painters have been haunted by painting a dog out, and yet the dog is still kind of in the field. And what we do is we go, there's something there I can't put my finger on. That's where I use the word another dimension. And I love that experience in all of Fred's work. Wonderful, wonderful techniques. Hardest subject on earth to paint, in my unhumble opinion today, is how do you capture the beauty of a sunrise? How do we take moments and put them in a bottle and hold them? The sunset, right? And some artists, because I know this artist's work, they paint it over and over again. And they learn how to capture that moment and express it. So my old advice to a lot of students was avoid the postcard. We all love a picture of a sunrise and a sunset. I love to sit and experience it. But I found it that awkward, hard subject to paint because I didn't do what this artist did and just paint it over and over again and go deeper. I am, kind of not a purist, but an old classic guy at the soul with a big poet wanting to get out and quite the character and ornery and dark sense of humor fellow. It's amazing painting. And the Pastel 100 this year, he was the grand prize. Young, there are a bunch of them. And I'm thrilled because all of us as pastelists, and we can celebrate where we're at in life, but we all keep going. You want the medium to be vital. Get the youth involved. And it's funny, he'll say, I'm probably not as young as you think. And I go, listen, anything under 70 is young at this point, right? And so, again, low horizon, beautiful shapes. And the other comment here, Basin, get to know him, he's very humble, wonderful artist, hard worker, is you think you can see every tree. You think you can see every crack on the mountain, but they're not there. This shows a mature eye in the way the eye and the human mind see. So we finish because we learn. We learn what's there. Trees are individual, blades of grass are individual, cracks on that mountain that I'm staring at. When I stare at you, you're in focus. But if I'm staring at her, you're out of focus. This is one of the greatest powers we have as an artist, is to understand not about fuzzy paintings, but what is important, where do we go? The mind will finish. It will believe every tree's there and every crack. This is a power in the best hands of a painter. Gorgeous portrait from Sergei, from Europe. One of the top awards. Very magical, very beautiful. I love that. I talked to him at the last convention about a piece he had. He was painting his aunt. It was people he knew intimately. Now, I haven't asked him, but I have a feeling he knows this person, and whether family member or not. Same thing as I started with the magic of fire. Olga is here from Russia. Unbelievable tonalist. Her palette is almost always neutrals. So when I don't know why being asked to put, a selection of pastels together, and I love them all. I really do. I want to take them all home, marry them all, and they'd say, what's your favorite? What's your favorite? And I go, how can you have a favorite in the pastel world, right? You can't have a favorite. They're each a different personality. So I love bad analogies, and I don't want to offend anybody. But if I had been a billionaire, I'd have probably had many mistresses on the side and loved them all, but for different reasons. But Giraud came to me even before Corinne had taken over from the family, and she said, we'd like you to put together a set. And I knew, neutral. Because people say gray, and we think, And I said, but it's neutral. The most powerful thing on your palette is gray. It is. It's everything. It's the magic. It's the glue that allows other colors to step up and be the grandiose colors on top of that foundation of neutral. And Olga's a master at it. Anyway, lovely painting. Corey. If I could die and come back as a portrait painter, and I'm not taking anything away from the other portrait painters, I want to be Corey when I grow up, because he just captures something, again, with power and mastery. It's not, the beauty of being human is not always superficial. That's lovely. I try to clean up and be presentable, but there's such intimacy in his work. I don't know this person. Corey could tell me about this person, but we look and we notice an earring. An earring. Look at that hair. Mohawk. And you just start reading into, I bet this guy's a character. I bet there's something going on there. I bet he's got a bunch of tattoos like Corey, And I feel like I know this person on a level that I wouldn't unless it was being done by Corey. Love these still lifes over at this side. I got to meet this artist. We're very fortunate he's here. David came over with what I call the French delegation, and they're just so lovely. He's dear friends with Sylvie. And I first saw his work decades ago in France, and it's a style that we didn't see much in the United States. And he's also very famous for Pinocchio, and that he would paint these little wooden things in this kind of trompe-l'oeil quality, and greatly refined and quiet And so, if we said, does it look like a pastel? What does that mean? What does a pastel look like? But he used pastel, so you saw like the thick, the bold marks of pastel, you know, the gestural quality of a Tony Elaine and the bravura of it. And I look at this and I go, look at this delicate use of pastel in this intimate trompe-l'oeil, and yet there's symbolism. What is that little tear and that little, is it a teardrop? Is it a what? What is that? There's a lot of magic in this man's piece. I'm going to finish and let you all go right here and right here. So I want to start here. She couldn't be here this time. This Lena Celta, we all know and love and admire, poet, living back up in Maine from her time in Florida. And I feel, if she was here, I would say this to her face, and then she could pull me aside and say, you got it wrong. I think when she went back to New England and up to these iconic places that she visits, it was like Winslow Homer, you know, and his iconic connection to the Atlantic and the rocks of Maine and things. And so thus the poet was then really back to the soul of who they were and what's there. So there's a lot of magic there. I love what this artist is doing because we're sitting here, so again, conjecture of what we're getting into it. Technique's fabulous. But the story, who have I just visited with? Am I sitting alone? What did I just finish eating? What was our conversation? What are the other people doing in the room? These are the observer, the voyeur in the moment. We sit, airports are my favorite place. I don't really want to engage. I'm focused on where I'm going and what I'm doing. I don't want to know about your whole life, but we observe and what's happening there. And cafes and places, so maybe she was there with her husband or love or her best friend, maybe alone, and contemplating and watching what was happening. The faces aren't there. They're turned away from them, see? There's just, it's such a powerful piece on so many levels in what I now reference as a more contemporary attitude. I would have never early on had permission to optically feel this off into that. But look at the depth exaggeration. Even if I left this portion the way it was, which we often do, people that are very guarded tend to like to begin the painting out there. I'm a middle ground painter. All right? I'll finish with a story from a great gallery owner. We often don't know who we are. We're on this journey, but we keep figuring things out as things happen to us through life. And often tragic things, things that can be controversial, things that are joyous. So I had a great relationship with this gallery owner, and I was bringing work in and sitting it down, and I was going back to my car and coming back out. And I heard her say, as I set some pieces down, she goes, "You're my middle distance painter." And I walk out the door and I'm going to the car and I go, "Middle distance painter? What the hell is that, right?" So you kind of look back at your work like, what the hell do you mean? So I had set all the work down and I went up to her. Her name was Pamela. Nobody else was in the gallery. And I said, "Pamela, middle distance painter?" And she goes, "Oh, Richard, don't you know that about yourself?" And I said, "No." and so like this painting, although mine was a landscape, she goes, you want solidity in the foreground. Your foregrounds were there, we're grounded. But you love to take us back and hold us in that middle ground and then give something mysterious further back. Here you're seeing it in an interior. Slightly out of focus, but scale tells us we're here. We're very grounded, right in front of us. Here's where the focus is held. Here's where the mystery is with something further. So she was explaining that to me, and I'm looking at my work, and I went, "Well, damn, I guess I am." And she's a dear friend. She was like a sister. And she goes, "That's you too." And I looked at her like this, and I said, that's enough. I don't want to know anymore. Later, she did say, she said, like the old Peanuts thing, you know, Linus and Lucy, and she says, Linus, what do you want to be? And he said, a physician. And she said, you can't be a physician. And he says, why can't I be a physician? And Lucy says, because you have to love mankind to be a physician. And Linus looks back at her and he goes, I love mankind. It's humans I can't stand. So what my gallery, and I'm not saying I can't stand humans, but what the gallery owner was saying, something that Jamie Markle, who had been the head at F&W, and I knew Anne, when I had a private moment with him once, he said, there's public Richard and there's private Richard, and they're the same person. And that's what I now look at my paintings, is that I want to be present. I want to go back and hold you at a safe distance away and let you linger. But then I want you to know there's more back there mysteriously waiting, because the journey's not over. Art is not a destination. It's a journey. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh my God, I didn't take 6 hours.